Hey everybody, welcome back to Jay's Fifth Down and Football Podcast. I'm here today with Aaron Freeman, host of the Locked On Falcons Podcast. I'm blessed to have him on to talk some football with us, some Falcons football, and we're going to get into that here in the crazy weekend in the NFL. But first off, let's make sure you guys check us out on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also checked out Aaron's podcast on Spotify and every other podcast platform, including YouTube as well. So check him out at Locked On Falcons. Aaron, Falcons and the Rams yesterday. Falcons were down 28-3. They were just getting manhandled throughout the game in the first half, and then they started coming back. So what are your thoughts on the game, man? And as you were watching, throughout from the first half going all the way to the second half to the end of the game, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was. I went into the game with kind of low expectations. Like I thought it was a winnable game. But I thought it was just kind of a bad matchup. And then sort of watching the first, 2.5 quarters when they fell into that 28-3 hole, it was like, okay, well, like it was a bad matchup and they, they just weren't able to overcome it. But then sort of in the fourth quarter, it was just something about that game was like, okay, well, last week against the Saints, they played really well for 3 quarters. And then they kind of everything unraveled for them in the fourth quarter. And there's just like this feeling of like, what happens if the opposite is this week? And they were able to start playing better. I think it helped that the Rams got probably a little conservative late in the game, trying to just salt away the game. And the Falcons took advantage of that. And they got a couple of big plays on offense. And then they got the big play on special teams. And all of a sudden, it went from, an 18-point deficit, with about 12 minutes to go to, like 6 points with however many minutes left in the game. And so it really did feel like the team had a chance to win. And, I give the team credit for, even if they did play 3 quarters of questionable to bad football, to go out there and not quit, not roll over, and to finish, to try their best to finish the game and getting really close. So, ultimately with Jalen Ramsey sort of picking off a pass at the goal line, basically within a yard of potentially winning that game. So I came away from that game, despite going into it with low expectations. I came away pretty, I wouldn't say excited, but like heartened by what I saw from the Falcons on Sunday.
Yeah. Arthur Smith talked about this after the Saints game last week. He just wanted there to be more fight in the team. He just, after they let the game slip through their fingers, and just want to see more competitiveness and improved play. And we saw that. In the second half from the Falcons. I mean, we had a block punt. Troy Anderson, huge play. He got in there and he blocked that punt. Lorenzo Carter scooped it up, as you said, and scored. I mean, it's like when you thought that the Falcons wouldn't be able to. I mean, they did it. They almost did it, but they were scoring and they were getting these opportunities off of miscues from the Rams. The Rams got complacent and conservative, and the Falcons took advantage of that, and they were able to come back. So, but offensively, what were your thoughts on how the offense moved the ball throughout the game, and was it a little bit of improvement or a decline from last week against the Saints?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the comments about lower expectations, because I didn't think they were going to have nearly as much success running the football against the Rams as they did against the Saints. And because of that, I went into the game being like, the Rams going to know that the running game is going to come. They're going to scheme ways to stop it. And then it's going to be forced for the Falcons to have to get into the drop back passing game. And they're going to get, torn apart once Aaron Donald's able to pin his ears back and really get after the quarterback. And with Leonard Floyd and some of the other pass rushers they have, that this offensive line, coming off a game where they really played well, is going to get torn apart. And I did, there were some breakdowns, but I didn't really see that. And I thought the fact that the Falcons did have a decent running game, they only ran for 90 yards, but it probably would have been more had the game been a little bit closer early on, and they, weren't necessarily forced to have to kind of get into this pass first mode, late in the game. And so like, I did come away overall looking at the offense as feeling better about it. Then again, part of that is owed to the low expectations. I think the one concern for the offense is, Mariota has not been great at quarterback when they had to get into that sort of straight drop back passing game.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's owed to the fact that that's never really been a strength of his game. And then you couple that with the fact that he basically was a backup for the last 2 years. And so, he's kind of knocking off some rust. And that leads to, concerns given that you have a young quarterback on the team and given those lowered expectations for, how good this Falcon team is going to be. It's caused a lot of people, since Sunday's game against the Rams to sort of call for the Falcons to turn the page on Mariota and start giving Desmond Ridder, the quarterback spot. And, while as a vocal Ridder stan, I guess you could call me, over the summer,
yeah.
I don't know if the Falcons are, quite there yet where they do need to feel compelled to allow Ridder to start week 3 against the Seahawks or week 4 against the Browns. But I do think we're probably closer there than, at least a lot of people were anticipating going into the season. So I think these next 2 games against Seattle, against Cleveland, if this offensive line, especially in this running game, can be as effective as it has been the first 2 weeks, it will give the Falcons a chance to, potentially win both of these games coming up. And we'll sort of have to see if Mariota can play better than what he has done so far. But to answer your question, I do feel like the offense is not perfect by any means, but I do think it's particularly because the running game and the offensive line and the pass protection have been much better than I thought they were. And I thought they would be like bottom of the league at that going into the season. I do feel like the offense is in a decent place at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. Mariota finished 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 81.6 quarterback rating. I think what got a lot of people, with Marcus Mariota the past couple of weeks is just how he's missing reads and some throws that maybe a little too high or too low or off a little bit. He's like you said, he's not a pocket guy. He's really never been one throughout his career. Even really he was at Oregon, and that's not what got him into the NFL. It's his legs. And his ability to make plays off of his legs and extend. But he has struggled a little bit, and as you mentioned, new offense. He's been a backup the last 2 years. People forget that. So now he's thrusted into the starting role here in Atlanta. So he's got to get acclimated to that. But the question is, how long are the Falcons going to give him before, as you mentioned, will they turn the page to Desmond Ridder? And it's something that we have to keep in mind over these next couple of weeks. And if he struggles against the Seahawks, then I think there's a chance, as you and Jarvis were mentioning on the podcast the other day on the postcast. I could see maybe that Cleveland game, Desmond Ridder could be starting. Who knows? It just depends. And now let me ask you this: what are your thoughts on the defense? From last season, and going to this year, do you see some signs of improvement based off these last 2 games, these 2 weeks of the season? It's still early, but
Yeah, there's been signs of improvement. I think the first game against the Saints, seeing an actual pass rush, and they got 4 sacks in that game, was incredible because it's been so long since the Falcons have had any pass rush to speak of. It kind of fell back down to earth, and they didn't really get adequate pressure on Matthew Stafford on Sunday. And I think that was part of the reason why, that offense, outside of the handful of turnovers that Stafford had, really had no problems moving the ball against this defense. So they did look a lot more like last year's defense that, a good quarterback could just move the ball up and down the field on them pretty easily on Sunday. But I think the main takeaway I would take from yesterday's game in terms of a positive development that piggybacks off of what we saw in week 1 is that this team is very opportunistic defensively. They're creating turnovers, and it's not just, hey, this receiver dropped the pass and a guy happened to be in the right place. You saw Michael Walker make a great play on the ball on an interception for Stafford. You saw Casey Hayward make a great play on the ball, an interception in the end zone that took points off the board for the Rams. And so it does feel like this defense, if they're not going to be this sort of stout defense, it's that bend but don't break style. And that's really kind of the style of defense that I think Dean Pease wants this team to be. It's not going to be a shutdown, forcing a ton of 3-and-outs, although they've gotten their fair share of 3-and-outs so far this season, which, I don't think happened. It didn't feel like it happened at all last year. But, they've gotten some of those, and they're, playing that bend but don't break style. And, they didn't do a great job of it on Sunday until the very end. But getting some of those stops in the red zone, I do feel like this defense has made progress this year. It's still a long way from being good, but it does feel like that if we can just kind of get a balance between what we saw in week 1 versus what we saw in week 2 against the Rams, somewhere in the middle is a pretty decent defense that's going to keep you competitive pretty much every single week.
Yeah, I agree. And just the opportunistic, man, like you mentioned, just making the plays when they're there for you to make. I mean, Darren Hall, he came up big. And what I noticed in the game, man, was there were some substitutions going on, late in the game. AJ Terrell was taken out, I think, for a bit, and Darren Hall was put in there. Terrell he's been struggling over the first 2 games of the season. I still think he is an all-pro corner. I think he's really good. He's just got to get in his groove. So do you think that was a contributor to the moments leading, throughout the comeback, the defense stepping up, making those plays with those substitutions?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that we did see a lot more sort of rotating, particularly in the secondary, where you typically have, your 4 or 5 guys that you're going to start, and then they play pretty much every single snap. And you did see some of the young guys step in, some changes at safety, some changes at corner. I'll be curious to see what Dean Pease says later in the week on that particular subject, if it was injury related or if it was just, certain guys maybe messing up a little bit, and him wanting to give some other people a chance because guys were missing assignments or anything like that. So I'll be curious to see if the film says anything or Dean Pease says anything specifically about that. But, I think with some of these young players stepping up, I think that's one of the things that you want to see, right? You mentioned Darren Hall getting a really big fumble, strip, and recovery, that really gave the Falcons that chance late in the game because, had he not done that, you expect the Rams to go down the field and run out the rest of the clock. Seeing some of these young guys step up, it gives you a lot of hope for the future. Well, maybe not a lot of hope. I should mince my words. There's no such thing as hope when it comes to being a Falcon fan, but it gives you some hope for the future. And that's kind of really what the season is about, right? It's another evaluation year. It's another year to sort of see what you have as part of this rebuild that this team is undergoing. And the more and more young players that kind of step up and show that they can be contributors and make plays in critical situations, as Darren Hall did and Michael Walker did and some of these other guys did on Sunday, I think does, again, give you some of that hope for what this team could be building up, particularly on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys stepping up, making those plays, that's what you want to see out of your young defensive crew, because for the most part, this is a fairly young defense. When you look at outside of a couple of guys, that being Grady and of course, Grady Jarrett, and those guys. But and now and then adding in the veterans like Carter, to come in, guys who've been in the league for a couple of years, of Georgia kids. So I think the Falcons have a goal of what they want to do. It's just a matter of again trying to continue to put it together. But offensively, Kyle Pitts, not too much of a factor in this game. 2 receptions, 19 yards. I know now he's going to get a lot of coverage and everything, but it didn't seem like the Falcons targeted him that much anyway. I don't know the exact number, but what does that concern you a little bit about Kyle Pitts?
It doesn't really. For me, at least, and again, I think some of that's owed to just not having these huge expectations, particularly when it comes to the conversation about Arthur Smith's play calling. Like I've been kind of critical of Arthur Smith in terms of his play calling over the last year. And so the fact that he's not really scheming ways to get to Kyle Pitts, 10, 15 targets a game is not really a surprise to me, although it may be to other folks. But, again, we'll see what the film says later this week when I get to watch it on Tuesday. But to be honest with you, like I think most of the Kyle Pitts stuff is more a Marcus Mariota issue than it is an Arthur Smith issue. Like it's not to me that the Falcons aren't scheming up plays for Kyle Pitts to, get opportunities to make plays. I know that was not the case in week one. Like he had plenty of opportunities to make plays. It was just the quarterback wasn't doing a great job getting the ball. And I think that, at least based off my initial rewatch of the Rams game, that was the case on a couple of those plays. Like there was right before the halftime, there was a big play down the field where Kyle Pitts got open on a double move and Mariota overthrew him. Now it drew a pass interference call, so the Falcons did get the yards. But like if Kyle Pitts catches that, if Mariota throws a better ball, or potentially arguably the defender doesn't interfere with him and he catches that, like I don't think many people will be like, oh man, we're not getting Kyle Pitts. And then there was another play where he threw the ball to Kyle Pitts in the end zone, and sort of initially on that play, Kyle Pitts was wide open, and Mariota was kind of looking on the opposite side of the field and didn't see him, and then kind of scrambled outside and then try to fit it in there where he was a little bit better covered at the end, and it went through Kyle Pitts' hands. And had he sort of seen him initially and threw that ball with timing and hit Kyle Pitts, he would have had a touchdown. And even though you would have came away from this game, like Kyle Pitts only had 3 or 4 catches, which isn't a huge number given the expectations. If one of those is a touchdown, I don't think many people are being like, oh no, Kyle Pitts is being underutilized, because it's like, okay, well, like he's getting all the attention. The narrative would be he's getting all the attention between the 20s from defenses, but then once you get into the red zone, he becomes the monster, the unicorn that we all want him to be. So I feel like that's part of it, where like I don't feel like it's as big a concern as or people are making it out to be. I think the opportunities are there. It's just the Falcons aren't really taking advantage of those. And I think that's, more on the quarterback than anything. And that's something that as Mariota, works his way back and hopefully knocks off this rust in the next couple of games, you'll see, more improvement from that. And so you may not see these monster, 8-9 catch games from Kyle Pitts this season. But if it's like 3 or 4 catches and a touchdown, again, I don't think many people are going to be complaining about that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just a matter of, Marcus, just the pocket mechanics just a little off, and I think a lot of people have to understand that. And of course, we want Kyle to get the ball. He's a beast. I think Arthur Smith said in his press conference, he's like, we're not trying to win. This isn't fantasy football. We're out here trying to win games, and so, and he means like, we're not trying to stat pad guys or anything like that. And Kyle Pitts piggybacked off of that in his presser as well. It's a team game, and of course, he's going to say, we want to win, and that's what's important. So that's a good response from him. And Drake London had a big game as well. He came up crucial, so that was good to see. He's continuing to emerge as that number one guy. So what are the keys based off this game last against the Rams? What are some things that we can take away from that going to the Seahawks game to, see what they can do, see if they can possibly get a win? What are some things you're looking for in that game against Seattle?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember watching the Monday night game against the Broncos in week one. My takeaways, and I thought Geno Smith played really well in that game. And, I know given it's a Pete Carroll coach team, he's going to want to run the football and play good defense. And that's kind of how the Falcons want to play. And they didn't really do that well again in the first 3 quarters of this Rams game. So I think basically you just want to take the fourth quarter, and if they can pick up where they left off against the Rams, that should give them a chance to beat Seattle. I think you'll see 2 sort of evenly matched teams, and ultimately it's going to kind of boil down to just who goes out there and executes their version of basically the same game plan this upcoming Sunday. And we'll just sort of see if the Falcons can give us a complete game. Like that's kind of where it's at. So I feel like not a whole lot probably will change in terms of their approach. They're going to run the football. They're going to play a lot of play action. They're going to have to stop the run. They're going to have to do all those things. And so I don't know if there's too much I can take from the Rams game that I think carries directly over to the Seattle game. But just if they can create some plays and get Kyle Pitts more involved in the red zone, that may help improve their red zone efficiency, which has been a problem area for them. And if they can be opportunistic on defense like they were and take advantage of the turnover opportunities that they have, then I certainly think it can lead to them getting a W on Sunday.
Yep. And the Seahawks, they had a good game against the Broncos week 1, and they just got completely stomped by San Francisco yesterday. So I'm sure they're going to be coming in fired up and ready to get a win here. So we're probably getting their best version of them on Sunday. So that'll be interesting to see. And Geno Smith, not a bad quarterback. This is a guy. He can throw the football. He can move. I mean, he's obviously been named the starter for a reason. So I expect him to play a good game as well. So the Falcons have got to limit that. But Aaron, I do appreciate you coming on, talking some Falcons football. Just remind our viewers where they can find your podcast and everything to listen to for the Falcons.
Yep, you can check me out Monday through Friday on Locked On Falcons on any podcast platform you're looking for, including YouTube. And if you enjoy snarky tweets about the Falcons, then you can follow me on Twitter at FalcFans, FalcFans.
Yes, of course. Yes, and great job you there on Locked On Falcons, man. And as well as Locked On Postcast for you and Jarvis Davis. Great stuff you guys do there. So keep that up, and thank you for joining us, Aaron. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Make sure you check us out here on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Check us out, and thank again for watching our podcast. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us.
No problem.